Hello there, friends. My name is MJ. If you don't know me, I am your host for today's Creatives Mirror podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you are doing fantastic. If you don't know me, I am an author, a poet, a online business manager for creatives and spiritual healers, also project management as well as part of that. And it's been a long time coming to do the work that I do. I really enjoy it. I am here today. If you don't know or seen my stuff, I want to just say I enjoy a good ramble, right? And usually I'll pick a subject and just go. And so this is what the podcast is about. So you can hang out if you want to. Today's lovely topic is going to be, I'm going to just ramble on about the last 30 some odd days of my film challenge that I've done. And we're going to just talk about it. What I learned, what I experienced, what pitfalls I came across, what things did I notice about myself, my mental health, and all of the things in between as a creator. And let's get into it. Hello, you beautiful soul. My name is MJ. I just want to come on here before we go into this episode of The Creatives Mirror. As some of you know, I am an avid journaler. I advocate for journaling as a way to process your emotions and channel a lot of things. And as a creative, it's really helped me put stories together and write poems and, the like it's great to be able to pull from something, right? And so, what I started doing to reflect on a lot of the ways, my own self, and one of the things that I was given a long time ago by a mentor, she's like, memo it, voice memo it. If you can't keep up with you writing it or typing it, just voice memo it, wake up or have the aha and just voice memo it. And I've been doing it for a really long time. And so some of the voice memos, I end up halfway through processing something. I was something will ping in my head, oh, I should maybe put this out there, someone might need to hear it. And so it starts off very much me talking to my future self or to my past self or whoever. And then, at the end of it, I'll end up just adding, I'm talking to you all. And so this is one of those where halfway through I realized that maybe somebody needed to hear this or was also processing very similar things. And so I wanted to share my thought process or what happens when I have an aha, something sparks a thought process, and this is what happens. So here is that episode. I am processing, this was something that I was processing, and I'm still kind of processing it a little bit, but that I had started to kind of look towards this masculine energy with how it has to do with how I process my money and the relationship I have with my money and how that contributes to my creativity. And so here we have that thought process. So these are my opinions. And also I am not a therapist. I am not a professional finance, whatever. I don't play those things. I'm not a doctor. I don't do diagnosis or anything like that. So if you do feel triggered by anything in this, please seek professional help. Also, again, these are my opinions. This is me trying to process stuff. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of incomplete sentences in this. I went through and tried to fix some of the transcript. So when I do that, I will go through and listen to the whole thing again to make sure I'm not missing. I put too much personal information or whatever. And some of it is rather personal. I did hesitate to put this out into the world, but I truly believe that someone really needs to hear this. And despite the differences of opinions I might get back, I truly believe that there's something good in here for at least one person. So without further ado, I'm going to share with you my thought process and how I process sometimes the little sparks of like ahas that happen to me and how I talk them out. And this is how I talk them out. This is very similar to how I would journal it out as well. So enjoy my rambling and let me know what you think. Okay, but I just heard this and it really resonates with me because I'm actively working on three things that have been coming up wound-wise. One is my mask energy, my relationship to my divine masculine, which is directly related to how I want love from my father, or how I wish that I was loved differently from my father figure, how I don't have a great relationship, how my relationships as a whole with men have been just basically chasing after the love that I wish that I had when I was growing up, the love and attention. And then this is also bringing up because recently I've been really leaning into my relationship, again being the key word, with money, with how I view money. And so all three of those have been coming up, and I did not connect those three until I went on TikTok and I was scrolling through, because I've been like doom scrolling a lot more lately, the last like few days than I'd like to admit. But I was doom scrolling until I came to Peachkka, which is one of the creators. She's a musician, and she's also a spiritual teacher, and does readings and all of that, healer. And she was like, you don't want money, you want love. And I was like, motherfucker, that shit hit me. So I was like, why you gotta do me dirty like that? Why you gotta do me dirty like that? Look, the three things that I've been working on: my divine masculine, my relationship with my father and how I view love in general, and my relationships with other people, and the direct actual take back of how I care for myself and what that looks like. Because back in the beginning of the year, when I did my 7 self-love challenge, which was basically taking 7 areas of my life and analyzing what one of those areas, or what few of those areas were I really forgetting. Because self-love wise, physically I was kind of whatever. Spiritually, I'm up there, self-love and the spiritual all day long. Self-love with food all day long. Like those are super easy, not easy, but easy ways to self-love. I understand the physical one. I understand what needs to be done. It's a lot harder to get there, but I get it, right? But when it comes to money in my business and being seen, that's another one that I've been talking about lately. This huge fear of not being seen, but being observed. And then finding out that a lot of creatives also have that problem, where it's this paradox where you're like, man, I want people to see my stuff. I want to be seen, but also don't see me. Don't observe me. Observe what I'm doing, but don't look at who I am, right? And so I'm seeing all of this, and now I'm connecting it. I'm connecting the money to my divine masculine, to my ability to love myself, and what pieces of those really connect. It really is all connected. It's all connected to that loving yourself and learning how to care for yourself wholeheartedly. And this is, and not to go off on a tangent, but I'm going to say it, how a woman who has made the habit a habit of loving and healing herself instead of looking for those externally is in this current society looked down upon or not wanted by men specifically or whatever, because it's scary for that particular group, because we can do it ourselves. You can't control somebody who can control themselves. And you can't control somebody and have them do your will if they're really super self-aware and can do the things for themselves, or can find others who align with them, who also have the same, are on the same vibe, the same energy length, the same, they have the same values. When you are the person who can care for yourself, or find those people who also have those same values, you become a really scary, dangerous person to people who look to others in the way that when they can't care for themselves, but they're at a point where they don't want to. When it's straight up denial, that's when you become a scary person for them. Right. And so I digress, but I wanted to just mention that because it's on my mind. And so, yeah, it all connected, all flippin' connected. It's all an act of self-love. It's all an act of self-care. And I heard something recently about self-care was coined by someone. When they were talking about self-care, they were talking about caring for yourself so you can care for others. It was never about the selfish part of caring for yourself. It's not self-care is selfish in that it is caring for yourself, but it's not selfish in the realm of when we talk about, oh, so-and-so is selfish. When you think of they're rejecting everyone around them so that they will get the benefit. They're hurting other people in order for themselves to get the benefit. Intentional maliciousness is what we're talking about when we talk about being selfish. And when you care for yourself because you're caring for your needs, whatever those are, for me, I'm caring for my needs. I'm learning how to care for my needs. And for me right now, what that looks like a little bit is I moved so I could be away from some of the people who were hurting me, some of them not intentionally, and some of them were hurting me intentionally. So I can be physically away from those people in order to care for myself. Was that selfish? If they look at it that way, if they look at it like I'm moving away from them so I don't have to deal with them, it kind of is. It sounds selfish. But when you're looking at it from a perspective of there are wounds I cannot heal from in the same environment that they were made. So I have to move away from that. And that's what was done. That's self-care. That is caring for myself. It's putting myself in an environment that is more conducive to healing the wounds that need to be healed in order to move towards more independence, in that I can better connect with human beings for what I feel like is the purpose of love as a whole. Right? Not only loving myself, the more I love myself, the more I have capacity to love other people, which brings me back to what I've been working on. This thing that's been coming up a lot for me lately is for the last year, I have really wanted a relationship. I tried one, it didn't work out. I really didn't feel at first I felt connected, and then I felt the wounds coming back and the codependency and all of that. And I was you know what? This is not time. It's not time for me at all. And so I took that time away, and recently I've been getting the pangs of I want to go back on to the dating sites again and whatever. And I'm okay, well, why? What changed? What things have changed in my life? And if we're being honest, the things that have changed are going back and learning about some of the deep trauma with my childhood trauma and loving. And how I was left to my own devices to love me when I didn't have the tools to do that, right, already. And that directly relates to my masculine, my father, and all of those things. And when you look at that, that's also those are very grounding things. That's, I consider money and resources to be part of the emperor or the father or the king figure, because the king is, supposed to be the one that protects, and the mother is more related to nature. And I not that I fully have gone through that, but I've gone through a decent portion of my feminine like healing process. And so what's left is this masculine, and that is directly related to money, which is kind of related to protection and resources and society. Masculine has to do with society, the law and the order and the figuring that out. And so all that stuff is connected, and the reasoning why I feel, again, going back to what Peachkka was saying about how you're not looking for money, you're looking for love, that makes sense. That I was looking for love in a place where maybe it did exist, in that my father figure did actually love me, but his job wasn't really to love. His job was to protect and to like get me ready for society. And in that, he was trying to do that, but I was already deficient in love because of my mother's situation. So what I was doing was looking in the wrong place for the wrong things. And I didn't know that until, 40 some odd years later, when I'm actually realizing that, because I had done the research, I've gone through the therapy, and it wasn't just the therapist, it was my own research. In my own research, when I was looking to create this short story, so I started looking at archetypes and the hero's journey and all of that. And really, it all kind of comes back to the mother and the father roles. What are those roles, and how do we... And now I'm sitting here thinking to myself, is this the journey that is this part of that hero's journey? That everyone comes back to this like realization of the roles that like mothers and fathers, those two kinds of energies actually have, and that they do have to exist, but it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a male and a female, but it does still have to, like, you still have to have that, like, because we do live in a society, and even if we didn't have cities and the way that things are, you still have the village, and even then, like, that represents the other people in the world that you have to live with, as opposed to self. So mother is very tied to self, and father is tied to living, how you have to be living with other people. Because if you were just solo by yourself, you wouldn't need to learn how to live with other people. That is a whole totally different thing. Money is part of that, like learning how to connect with other people. That's part of that. Learning how to protect yourself. Like, man, if nobody else existed and you were just solo floating around on your own, you don't need protection from what? Like, what do you need protection from? Right? And so the masculine exists because, when we talk about the masculine, we're not talking about male or female. We're talking about the energy of masculine, which is the order side of the yin yang, that side. And then that is directly what wound I'm working on right now, is that, the order side. And that I'm very familiar with my chaos. That's great. But they serve each other, right? And so, but that's a whole nother thing that I just learned about too, serving each other. So anyway, yeah, I don't want money, I want love. But using that to my advantage, right? Knowing that now, I can say, okay, well, a friend of mine, we were talking about money and relationships and stuff like that recently. It is my modality, or was my job title for the longest time, bookkeeper. I was also a banker, so I've worked with money for a really long time and just haven't had a really great relationship with it on my own, with myself. So when I look at all this and I say, okay, and we had talked about it, and she was like, I think we should have a meeting like once a week, or you should hold a meeting or something where we have a relationship with our money. So we kind of treat money like it is just another relationship in our lives. And I think if we start to look at it like that, we can start to heal how we see it as a part of ourselves, and not just this thing that a burden that society has given us, right? And so that's how I've started to try to look at money, is that when it comes in, it's, a piece of me that's coming in, and I'm having the relationship with it, whatever that looks like. Like, money is, when it has to go to a bill, it's leaving to go pay that bill. It's leaving to go give the bill. energy, to give it energy to the bill. Let's use a phone bill as an example, because I have a phone bill, like many other people. And so when I pay my phone bill, I imagine money as this like person, like a version of me, or like a doppelganger of me, just like walking over to the phone place and having an exchange with them about like whatever, like, hey, like I want this the ability to have a relationship with a phone that will give me the advantage of having a relationship with many other people, without the inconvenience of having to go out and do it physically, right? That's what a phone is. It gives you convenience. And so basically I'm paying for the convenience. When I break it down as to what are the advantages of this bill that I'm having, instead of taking it for advantage, and I'm going to use the word entitlement because I feel like that's directly, like, I don't love the word entitlement. It gives me the ick every time I hear the word entitlement. And so when I use the word entitlement, like in this instance, like when I was paying my phone bill, I was pissed off every time I had to pay the phone bill. I was like, I'm pissed off. But to me, when I'm angry at having to do something like that, I feel like it's the opposite of grateful. I'm feeling entitled to a certain thing. And really, I'm just taking advantage of the fact that there's a convenience that now I'm used to. And we could blame ourselves for that. Like, I could blame myself for that. But at the same time, we are built as humans to take the easy way out of things. That's built into our human existence. That's built into our framework as humans, because we are looking to make things easier for ourselves so we can use less energy in our bodies. And so what is this saying? And actually there's a psychological or like a case study somewhere, I remember saying that, like, if you give somebody something once, they're grateful, they won't expect it again. You give it to them twice, they're grateful, they won't fully expect it to come back again. But if you give somebody something 3 times, they've already started to expect that thing will come to them every time going forward. And that is a subconscious habit that happens to us. We have to literally fight against that habit, that subconscious habit of entitlement to a thing that's given to us. And so the act of gratitude is a conscious act, which is why it's tied so heavily to the like mental health, like part of the world or the group of mental health kind of movement, is because when we are actively grateful for the things that we have, we can kind of label, even if it's subconsciously, the areas in which we are feeling entitled. And if we start to feel entitled, I know it's feeling yucky to use that word, and you may be angry, and if you are, we're getting somewhere, that we feel like we're owed this stuff. And the paradox of the human condition is that while we want things to be, our bodies and our brains want things to be easy, so we create neural pathways for those things to be easy, like expecting something to come after 3 times, even if it's not going to again. Subconsciously, we're wishing for it. And so we can stop thinking about that need, right? The paradox to that, the juxtaposition, that's the fuckery that is our brains, is that if we have too much ease, it creates dis-ease, which creates stuff like sadness, heavy depressive feelings, which is why exercise is good, because it gives us some pushback, whatever, or any of the other things, in gratitude. Again, it's not that it's hard, it's that we're kind of, by having that gratitude practice, we're pulling back the reins of our conditioning to take everything for granted, and taking back control of our conscious and subconscious. So I know this was a wee bit of a tangent, But coming back to the point that was, you don't want money, you want love. That when we heal, we start to realize these things. When we can observe ourselves with as little judgment towards ourselves as possible, we can start to have our own aha moments and maybe start to share them. And that's where our self-love comes from. Like, we can have the aha moments, but we also have to, with the aha, give ourselves grace to say we didn't have the space, the patience, the tools, the people around us to support that process of healing, that space that was needed to have those ahas, so we can look back at our past and say, oh, right, because hindsight's 2020, but it's only 2020 because you're looking at it from your today eye, right? And your today eye knows way more than you did back then. So, yeah, all of this was to say that I make a lot of these voice memos, and some of them make it into my podcast. And I don't know if you're listening to this, and if you are listening to this, and obviously it has made it into the podcast. But wow, it's this practice I have of when I have a thought process, I will go into my voice memo and just talk it out. It's been a lifesaver for me. I could realize some of the things that are going on in my everyday a lot quicker. I can catch things a lot quicker than I did before. And also, like, going onto social media with the intent, even if it's subconscious, with the intent to find stuff that sparks my interest, sparks some form of healing for me, because that's, healing is kind of a naughty word a little bit, but it sparks a more awareness, right, of love and all of that. So yeah, keep on, my friends, seriously. We got this. I know I've been feeling a little less overwhelmed lately because I've been able to journal out a lot. Like, I have a channel for it. So I highly recommend it to everyone. Writing is a channel for me, just journaling the hell out of it, but also these voice memos are super duper helpful because sometimes I just need to voice it out. I just need to talk it out because I can't write as fast as my voice can actually speak. Clearly, I'm speaking very fast. So, love your faces. Keep on. We're just gonna keep healing. We're gonna keep seeing. We're gonna keep hearing. We're gonna keep feeling the things. We're gonna sit with it. We're gonna have it show us where it is, and then we're gonna give it the space that it needs. And a lot of times for us creatives, that's exactly what's needed in order for us to start creating, if we're blocked, or to start to have some of the best pieces of our careers. So keep going. I love your faces. Thank you so much for listening. You're such a beautiful soul for listening to my ramblings. I hope it's helpful. I have a note here to say that we all have these like unaligned patterns. And whether it's our relationships, how we approach money, or how we care for ourselves, if you've seen yourself in any of the things that I do, or this podcast episode, know that you're not crazy, you're not out of your mind, you're not alone. We're all unraveling and healing and finding our way, like one insight at a time. So I hope that this gave you light in some way, and I hope you have the most amazing healing and enlightened day. Love your face. Hi, you're still here? Amazing. Thank you so much for listening. Just a quick little thing. If you feel like you really like listening to my ramblings, or you just align with what I say, or you get some insight, feel free to find me on or subscribe, whatever you need to do. But I would really appreciate a subscribe to my Substack or my Medium. I am at MJ Coppola, and on either one of those platforms, and those things are in the notes, so feel free to click away and subscribe and support, because support is supportive. I love your face.